The attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, sent a wave of mass hysteria across the country. People were convinced that Japanese Americans were giving the Japanese army information and aiding them in World War II. The outcry from the citizens caused President Franklin Roosevelt to sign Executive Order 9066. This order allowed the government to make quote unquote military areas in which anyone could be excluded. With Executive Order 9066 released, the government had full authority to lock people of Japanese descent in prison camps. On March 18, 1942, the Federal War Relocation Authority (WRA) was established to isolate and relocate anyone of Japanese descent during the war. Japanese Americans were given the notice to gather all they could carry and leave everything else behind. First, they were sent to assembly centers in isolated areas near where they would live. Once set up, they were transported to a relocation center where they were forced by the government to live for years. The Japanese people tried to make community in the camps, with jobs, churches, and schools for younger residents. However, they were still treated horribly and had horrendous living conditions. Internees were given terrible housing, like army-style or horse barracks, with little protection from the intense heat and cold. Along with barracks, the camps were surrounded by armed U.S. troops and barbed wire. Snipers stood on top of sentry towers with orders to shoot anyone who tries to escape. There wasn't a lot of death in the camps, but occasionally people were shot because the snipers believed they were trying to escape, although they were not. There was also violence among the internees, as mentioned in the graphic novel They Called Us Enemy by George Takashi. The government decided to give internees a loyalty test. If they were deemed loyal, they would be released from the internment camps. There were two absurd questions on this test, questions 27 and 28. Question 27 asked if second-generation immigrants, Nisei, were willing to serve on combat duty whenever ordered. This greatly offended the Nisei because they were being asked to fight in a war for a country that locked them, their families, and their communities into camps. Question 28 asked if the test taker would swear not to take action against the U.S. in the war and have no allegiance to the Emperor of Japan. This question implied that all Japanese Americans were aligned with the Emperor of Japan because of their race. According to the novel They Called Us Enemy, people who responded no to both questions were called no-nos and sent to Tule Lake Relocation Camp, a maximum security camp. Once the war had ended, the Japanese people were finally released from the relocation camps all across the country. The Japanese American Evacuation Claims Act of July 2, 1948 awarded over $36 million to families for the loss of property and personal items. Only on February 16, 1976, was Executive Order 9066 repealed by President General Ford. Along with the repeal, President Ford apologized personally for the treatment of Japanese citizens. In 1988, the U.S. Congress passed the Civil Liberties Act, which gave the surviving Japanese Americans reparations, another formal apology from President Ronald Reagan, and $20,000 was given to each individual that had lived through the event.